Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 5th of January, 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me by video link, we have Vanessa Beeley from Damascus and Ben Rubin from London. So thank you both for joining. We're going to start off with Epstein. And of course, the name that has been trending on X for the last couple of days is Prince Andrew. We'll all remember the BBC interview where he has denied vehemently all the allegations against him with respect to Jeffrey Epstein and Epstein Island and so on. And of course, this trending is happening because of two document releases so far. There's supposed to be another one today. The first one on Wednesday was 40 documents, and then even more released yesterday. And quite honestly, at this point at least, there doesn't seem to be anything much new in any of these documents so far, but we will wait to see what happens next. The Miami Herald has made a request to the District Court, Judge Loretta Preska, attempting to get hold of the full list of names and the full list of pseudonyms that are mentioned unredacted from these documents. And so we wait to see what happens with that and whether that brings anything new. But the BBC, of course, had to cover this, and they did it here. Prince Andrew faces allegations from unsealed US court documents about Jeffrey Epstein. So this is from yesterday. And I wanted to highlight one sentence from this. Prince Andrew is no longer a working royal, and as such, Buckingham Palace does not comment on his behalf. And they left it there. So that the BBC quite happy not to do any further digging on that at all. So this was the first page of the first document. And this, as I say, Honourable Loretta A. Preska releasing these documents and so on. So who has been mentioned? Well, the top three, I believe, are Prince Andrew, mentioned 110 times in the two documents. Bill Clinton, mentioned 83 times. And Vanessa, sorry, you're going to have to remind me.
Alan Dershowitz.
Thank you, Dershowitz. Yes, Epstein's lawyer mentioned 166 times. All these people deny everything, of course. But one of the documents, so one of the quotes from the second batch of documents, of course, is from Johanna Schulberg. Bill Clinton likes them young, referring to girls. So the people on the list, most of them, as you read through the documents, did you have any sexual relations with this person or that person or the next person? And the answer in each case was no. But obviously names going around like Michael Jackson, Stephen Hawking, David Copperfield, Cameron Diaz, Kate Blanchett, Leonardo DiCaprio, Bruce Willis, and so on. And this is getting lots of social media traction. But we should not forget, of course, that everyone's friend, Bill Gates, still has many answers to questions to answer as well. So what can we add to this? Well, I just wanted to remind everybody about a little piece of video that was released by Project Veritas in 2019 of Amy Robach from ABC News. Let's just remind ourselves of this. This was supposed to be an open mic incident, supposed to be.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton, we had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it. I'm so pissed right now. Like, every day I get more and more pissed because I'm just like, oh my God, what we had was unreal. Other women backing it up. Hey, yep. Brad Edwards, the attorney, 3 years ago, saying there will come a day when we will realize Jeffrey Epstein was the most prolific pedophile this country has ever known. I had it all 3 years ago. So do I think he was killed? 100%. Yes, I do. Because he made his whole living blackmailing people. Yeah. There were a lot of men in those planes, a lot of men who visited that island, a lot of powerful men who came into that apartment.
Now, following that, then she released this statement saying, as a journalist, as the Epstein story continued to unfold last summer, so remember this was written in 2019, I was caught in a private moment of frustration. She's referring to that video clip there. I was upset that an important interview I'd conducted with Virginia Roberts didn't air because we could not obtain sufficient corroborating evidence to meet ABC's editorial standards about her allegations. My comments about Prince Andrew and her allegation that she had seen Bill Clinton on Epstein's private island were in reference to what Virginia Roberts said in that interview in 2015. I was referencing her allegations, not what ABC News had verified through our reporting. The interview itself, while I was disappointed it didn't air, didn't meet our standards. In the years and since, no one has ever told me or the team to stop reporting on Jeffrey Epstein, and we've continued to aggressively pursue this important story. ABC News said at the time not all of our reporting met our standards to air, but we've never stopped investigating the story. Ever since, we've had a team on this investigation and substantial resources dedicated to it. And yet, despite all that, the full weight of the mainstream media, we seem to be no further forward today than we were in 2019, or in fact, prior to that as well. So as with respect to Prince Andrew, of course, we have at the UK column had some contact with him, particularly over this story, which was abuse at the Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. This article published in 2011. Subsequent to this article being published, then we found out that Prince Andrew was intending to visit the college, so we invited him perhaps to reconsider that decision, and he absolutely refused to do so. So anyway, you take out of that what you will. It's many questions still to be asked, but unfortunately, as far as I can see, up to this point, nothing particularly new in these new releases, other than we keep it in the public eye and we get a clue as to the type of people that we have running this world at the moment. Vanessa, let's move over to you. And, well, the question of genocide.
Yeah, so quite extraordinary event in the sense that South Africa has now invoked the Genocide Convention at the ICJ, and the hearings will be held on the case against Israel on the 11th and 12th of January 2024. I was looking for a review of the actual 84-page report by South Africa, and I recommend people go to John J. Mearsheimer's Substack to read what he says. So it's an 84-page application that South Africa filed with the International Court of Justice on the 29th of December 2023, accusing Israel of committing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. It maintains that Israel's actions since the war that began on 7th of October are intended to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial, and ethnic group in the Gaza Strip. That charge fits clearly under the definition of genocide in the Geneva Convention, to which Israel is a signatory. He then goes on to say, apologies for the dog barking, my neighbours suddenly decided to go on the roof. The application provides a substantial body of evidence showing that Israeli leaders have genocidal intent towards the Palestinians. Indeed, the comments of Israeli leaders, all scrupulously documented, are shocking. One is reminded of how the Nazis talked about dealing with Jews when reading how Israelis in positions of the highest responsibility talk about dealing with the Palestinians. In essence, the document argues that Israel's actions in Gaza, combined with its...
I'll read the rest of that, Vanessa. Hold on. So it says, in essence, the document argues that Israel's actions in Gaza, combined with its leaders' statements of intent, make it clear that Israeli policy is calculated to bring about the physical destruction of Palestinians in Gaza. So have you muted yourself?
Sorry about this. If we move on to the next slide, then he basically says the document goes to considerable lengths to put the Gaza war in a broader historical context, making it clear that Israel has treated the Palestinians in Gaza like caged animals for many years. It quotes from numerous UN reports detailing Israel's cruel treatment of the Palestinians. In short, the application makes clear that what the Israelis have done in Gaza since the 7th of October is a more extreme version of what they were doing well before October the 7th. And of course, what is Israel's reaction to this? They claim that it's blood libel. Israel slams South Africa for filing the ICJ genocide motion over Gaza. And in the text, what they actually say, South Africa's claim has no factual and judicial basis and is a despicable and cheap exploitation of the court. The Israeli Foreign Ministry said in a statement, South Africa is collaborating with a terror group that calls for the destruction of the state of Israel. Fairly typical projection there. And going on to the White House, which claims it sees no evidence of acts of genocide. Genocide is one of the most heinous atrocities that any individual can commit. Those are allegations that should not be made lightly. We are not seeing any acts that constitute genocide, State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said during a news briefing in response to a question about South Africa's decision. And then if we can just play a video from the infamous John Kirby, who basically in about 8 seconds proves himself also to be a genocide denier, if we can play that.
South Africa's filed this 84-page lawsuit against Israel, accusing them of genocide. Israel says that this is blood libel. Does Washington agree? And where does this put Washington and Pretoria?
We find this submission meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact whatsoever.
Brian.
What's interesting is that Israel has chosen a British legal expert to represent it in the International Court of Justice genocide case. Professor Malcolm Shaw will have to argue that Israel is in fact complying with international law and that extreme statements from Israeli leaders don't reflect official policy in Gaza. Now, of course, the hardest thing usually to prove over a case of genocide is that of intent, and that appears to be very clearly proven with the statements that are coming from the Israeli leadership. So Shaw also teaches a course at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem as a guest lecturer every year. In the first stage of the case, Shaw will have to contend with South Africa's request for an injunction ordering Israel to stop the war in the Gaza Strips on the grounds that it constitutes genocide. Through such an order could theoretically be enforced by the UN Security Council through sanctions. Of course, America would likely veto such a move. Nevertheless, an injunction could result in Israel and Israeli companies being ostracized and subject to sanctions imposed by individual countries or blocs. So we're at an interesting stage at the moment, and a fairly pivotal one in what's going on, not only in Israel and Palestine, but in the region. Palestine's top diplomat to the UK, the head of the Palestinian mission, Hossam Zomlot, has also warned the UK against Britain's complicity in Israeli ethnic cleansing after rumours that Tony Blair was going to be working on the displacement and the repatriation in other countries of the Palestinian refugees in Gaza.
Okay, thank you for that, Vanessa. Now, Ben, let's welcome you to the programme and come back to the UK then. Well, what's going on in the House of Lords?
That den of thieves. Well, there's quite a lot going on there. I'm going to touch on one individual in particular, and as it relates to the topic of what I think is medical fascism, which defines our health system right now, and the revolving door between top-level government and private sector positions. The individual I'm talking about is this guy, James O'Shaughnessy. He is a British Conservative politician, the author of the 2010 Conservative Manifesto, and also author of the Lord O'Shaughnessy Review, which came out in May last year. That is a review into commercial clinical trials in the UK. This is a top-level strategy report setting direction for the whole of the UK health system Two things to note. It's a very long report, so it's about 80 pages long, but a couple of things that really jump out at me. The first one is on page 1, is it actually holds up the COVID vaccine task force as an exemplar of how the entire health system should be run. Actually, you've jumped ahead a little bit there with the slides. Secondly, it promotes full population participation in clinical trials as some kind of desirable end state for UK healthcare. Essentially, Lord O'Shaughnessy's UMA. Now, HUMA is a World Economic Forum partner. So obviously that is a deeply inappropriate type of organisation to have inside the health system. But unfortunately, again, this is unsurprising, given all of this is happening in the context of the UK government life sciences vision, which is the slide that we had a little sneak preview of a moment ago. So this is the Build Back Better document. I've spoken about this a few times over the past couple of months. This was released in 2021, signed by Boris Johnson. It has Build Back Better on the cover and in the opening statement, signed by the Prime Minister. And essentially it sets out a vision for before he issued his report. He founded Newmarket Strategy. This is a healthcare consulting firm focused on establishing new markets, get it, inside the NHS for global pharmaceutical and technology companies to essentially trade in our system. So you have here an individual who is not only writing policy, but also trading in the market that the policy is designed to govern. Yeah, that is a total integration of market and state. That is the dictionary definition of fascism, and Newmarket Strategy sits right at the heart of it. They are hiring very senior people into leadership positions from the NHS into Newmarket. They've been doing this very aggressively. I'm going to talk about two individuals in particular. The first one is this gentleman, the spectacularly named Blake Dark, who joined Newmarket at the start of 2023. And he was before that in the position of Chief Commercial Officer for NHS England. So he was responsible for around £20 billion a year in drug procurement. He was also on the NHS England Executive Committee. Before that, he had a 25-year career in the global pharmaceutical industry. He was a sales director at Sanofi, which is one of the big providers of pharmaceuticals into the NHS, particularly they're a big supplier of insulin. There's a little roadmap here showing some of the stuff that he did during his career. Essentially, this is just funneling lots of money to big companies and making sure that they're able to earn a decent margin on their drugs. More recently, and this is why this is particularly newsworthy, this cropped up in the past couple of weeks. So David Sloman has joined Newmarket Strategy. He joined right at the end of last year. And he is another extremely senior former NHS colleague. He was the Chief Operating Officer of NHS England. So you now have the former Chief Commercial and Chief Operating Officers of NHS England working at Newmarket Strategy. Before that, he was the Regional Director for NHS England London. So he was ultimately responsible for all NHS operations in London. You're on mute.
Sorry, I do apologize. It seems to be a common problem today. Right. Okay, we'll start that again. If you like what the UK column does, you'd like to support us, please check out community.ukcolumn.org. There are options for you to help us out there. You could pick up something at the UK column shop, but please do share anything you find on the various platforms, especially from ukcolumn.org and ukcolumnextracts.co.uk, and make sure you scroll down the page if you're looking at ukcolumn.org, and you will find a spectacular article by Vanessa Beeley and Dr. Piers Robinson. There, it's in the comment section. Please go have a look at that. Now, yesterday at 1 p.m, we put out the interview that I did with Ben Pyle on climate change. That is on the front page of the UK column website as well. If you haven't seen that yet, please do have a look, because it is Ben is a very interesting guy with a lot of interesting things to say. So have a look at that. Now, on Sunday, as we mentioned, at 6 p.m. UK time, we're hosting, on behalf of the International Centre for 9/11 Justice, this symposium called Genocide and Empire. This is examining October the 7th and the geopolitics of the war in Palestine. It's going to be moderated by Dr. Piers Robinson. It'll have Professor Richard Falk, Professor Atif Kabersi, Vanessa Beeley, Dr. Aaron Wood, Kevin Ryan speaking. That is going to be an extremely interesting event. do watch that live, 6 p.m. On Sunday, if you can. Now, Debbie pointed me at this yesterday because there's an opportunity for everybody to sign up for the MHR Innovation Accelerator. This is all about nurturing innovation in academia. So the MHRA Innovation Accelerator provides innovators in academia access to leading scientific expertise and regulatory guidance. And there are still a few tickets left. It is free, I believe. So if you want to take part in that, ask a few questions maybe, that's on Eventbrite, and you can find it there. And finally, a reminder that Andrew Bridgen is hosting another debate on trends in excess deaths on the 16th of January at the House of Commons. That begins at 9:30 a.m. And he's asking for people to write to their MPs and encourage NATO have said that they intend at that meeting to discuss Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, the situation on the ground, and NATO and allied continued support for Ukraine. The Ukrainian foreign minister then had this to say, that as far as they're concerned, air defense is a key issue. Now, they didn't suggest any timescales for when they would want improved air defense. They certainly didn't suggest any timescales for when they would be expecting the next tranche of support. But that is the key issue for them. They didn't have to wait long for an answer, though, because yesterday NATO announced this. They're going to buy 1,000 Patriot missiles to enhance allies' air defences. Actually, that was on Wednesday. And they say in this, NATO Support and Procurement Agency will support a coalition of allies, including Germany, the Netherlands, Romania, and Spain, to procure up to 1,000 Patriot missiles to strengthen their air defences amid Russia's war against Ukraine. And, well, this deal is going to be a big one because they are going to effectively set up manufacturing in Germany for these Patriot missiles. So this will be done with a $5.5 billion contract to Comlog, which is a joint venture between Raytheon in the US and the German company MBDA. And that order will support the setup of a production facility for Patriot missiles in Germany. So the military-industrial complex doing very, very well out of this whole thing, even though the war is effectively being lost. In the meantime, what's Poland up to? Well, here we go. This is Radosław Sikorski. We should respond to the latest onslaught in Ukraine that language that Putin understands by tightening sanctions so that he cannot make new weapons with smuggled components, and by giving Kiev long-range missiles that will enable it to take out launch sites and command centers. He then went and spoke to Joseph Borrell, who's, of course, the European Union's sort of foreign minister. And Borrell saying that on Wednesday they had a good discussion with Sikorski. We shared increasing concerns over intensified Russian air attacks against Ukraine civilian infrastructure. We agreed on the need to enhance our military support to Ukraine, including with long-range and anti-aircraft missiles. So then he went on to follow that up by saying, we also discussed ways to reinforce anti-sanction circumvention measures, since the significantly increased European exports to third countries could be re-exported to Russia. So the question is, why does Ukraine see it as really important to deal with their air defences? Perhaps occasionally the Defence Intelligence in the UK does publish something that maybe is useful. They say that since the 29th of December 2023, Russia has increased the intensity of its long-range strike operations against Ukraine. Its forces have committed a significant proportion of the stock of air-launched cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that built up over recent months. The recent strikes likely, just before we move on, actually, just consider that for a second. Air-launched cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that Russia has built up over recent months. The UK, the US, the EU, of course, haven't built anything up over recent months. We have expended all our reserves and aren't really able to replace those terribly quickly. Russia seems to be doing a lot better. But I believe that from the beginning, we were told that the target was to destroy Russia's economy and end its ability to wage a war. Doesn't seem to have worked. But anyway, putting that back on for 1 second, they go on to say the recent strikes likely primarily targeted Ukraine's defense industry. This contrasts with its major attacks last winter, which prioritized striking Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Russia appeared to restart this campaign by hitting energy sites in early December 2023. These new operations suggest at least a temporary change of approach in Russia's use of long-range strikes. Russian planners almost certainly recognize the growing importance of relative defense industrial capability as they prepare for a longer war. So that's where we're at the moment. Ukraine in real trouble because they've effectively lost. They are seeing reduced, if not support ending for them at this point in time, and everybody's eyes turn towards the Middle East, and they're not happy about it. So let's, Vanessa, turn our eyes back to the Middle East and the question of the possibility of expansion of the conflict.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely looking at escalation that we were talking about before Christmas. And from Christmas onwards, we've seen a series of events that have demonstrated the escalation in progress. So first of all, I think that was on New Year's Eve, the US sinks Yemeni boats enforcing the Red Sea blockade against Israel. Of course, Yemen has made it clear that not only will it attack Israeli boats or Israeli-owned boats, but it will attack any vessel that is taking equipment or cargo to Israel itself. And then we've had various threats also from the UK to carry out airstrikes against Yemen. They haven't materialized, and Yemen is quite rightly saying, if you're just going to threaten, then you're not going to follow through. How can we have any respect for your statements? So this is published by the White House, a joint statement, what I call the coalition of the unwilling. The United States, Australia, Bahrain, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Germany, Italy, Japan, Netherlands, New Zealand, Republic of Korea, Singapore, and of course the United Kingdom. Noticeable that Saudi Arabia is not on there. It seems to be wanting to focus on fostering peace with Yemen and ending its own proxy war on behalf of the US and the UK against Yemen that started in 2015. So I think within the text of the statement, it's very clear what is actually driving this desire by the US to escalate against Yemen. They claim, of course, it threatens innocent lives. No lives so far have actually been lost in the 25 operations that have been carried out by Yemen and Ansarullah. They constitute a significant international problem that demands collective action. Here we get to the nitty-gritty. Let's say nearly 15% of global seaborne trade passes through the Red Sea, including 8% of global grain trade, 12% of seaborne traded oil, and 8% of the world's liquefied natural gas trade. International shipping companies continue to reroute their vessels around the Cape of Good Hope. And then moving on, Mike, so then they basically say, let our message now be clear. We call for the immediate end of these illegal attacks. So it's fine for the US to come to the support of Israel against the Palestinians, but it's not fine for Yemen to retaliate on behalf of the Palestinians against Israel and the United States. We call for the immediate end of these illegal attacks and release of unlawfully detained vessels and crews. The Houthis will bear the responsibility of the consequences should they continue to threaten lives. They said no lives have been lost in the operations. The global economy and free flow of commerce in the region's critical waterways. We remain committed to the international rules-based order and are determined to hold malign actors accountable for unlawful seizures and attacks. I don't think I need to comment on that. Yemen has responded. We will continue to prevent Israeli ships or those heading to the ports of occupied Palestine from navigating in the Red and Arabian Seas until food and medicine is brought into our brothers in the Gaza Strip. The Yemeni armed forces also confirmed that any American aggression will not go unanswered or unpunished. We warn the American enemy or others against any attack or action that represents the protection of commercial ships that go to the Zionist entity. Then it's quite interesting because the news has broken that the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier is returning home back to the US after extended deployment defending Israel. And the USS Bataan and its accompanying warships, the USS Mesa Verde and the USS Carter Hale, the three vessels have been in the Red Sea and have been transiting towards the Eastern Mediterranean. So does this mean, Mike, that they are effectively leaving the area where they might be under threat from the Yemenis? I think that's a good question to ask. Then going forward, we had basically on the 2nd of January, this was on Christmas Day, Israel assassinated Iranian commander in Damascus, General Mousavi, who was responsible really for the liaison between the resistance in Syria and the resistance in Iran, and was a very close comrade of General Qasem Soleimani. Now, he was, as I said, targeted on Christmas afternoon in a very busy civilian area, and there were casualties. So this is international aggression and terrorism under international law. Then before Christmas, we spoke about the fact that Israel is trying to push Hezbollah military to the north of the light blue line and the Litani River, invoking UN Resolution 1701 that came into effect during the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah. Of course, that has been unsuccessful, but the rhetoric has been very much about, for example, if they don't do so, then according to Netanyahu, Beirut will be turned into Khan Yunis, which is in the south of Gaza. So on the 2nd of January, one day after New Year, senior Hamas figure Salah al-Aruri was killed in Lebanon, in Beirut, in southern Beirut. So this is a direct attack on the capital of Lebanon in the south. And again, there were civilian casualties and there were other casualties. They targeted his home in Dahe, which is an area of southern Beirut. Who was al-Aruri? Well, the Israeli newspaper Yediot Aharonot characterized Marta Sheikh al-Aruri as the mastermind of the operations in the West Bank and who pulls the string there. The Mossad chief has been quoted as saying Israel is committed to finding and killing all Hamas leaders globally, and he mentioned the fact that they were able to target them even in Iran. And of course, then on the 3rd of January, we saw dozens killed in the Kerman explosion in Iran on the 4th anniversary of the assassination of Qasem Soleimani that was carried out under the Trump administration. Now, interestingly, Islamic State have claimed responsibility for the Iran bombings that killed at least 84 civilians that were attending his burial place in Kerman on the anniversary of his assassination, and 173 were injured. Interesting, as I said, that ISIS are claiming responsibility. ISIS, of course, is a proxy of both Israel and the United States in Syria. So one can argue, particularly after the statement by the military intelligence officer, that they would hit targets in Iran, that potentially there are Mossad hands on this attack also. And then on the 4th, we had another assassination. This has been claimed by the United States against one of the commanders of the PMU, the Popular Mobilization Forces, that have been responsible for battling ISIS inside Iraq and on the border with Syria. U.S. claims responsibility for an attack on Iraqi official in Baghdad. And again, there were civilian and other casualties after the attack. The claim by the U.S. is that they carried out this assassination because of the attacks on unlawful U.S. bases in Syria and bases in Iraq. Of course, now the Iraqi administration is demanding the exit of the U.S. occupation forces in Iraq. And I just wanted to point out here where this escalation is taking us. So we looked before Christmas at the map of Greater Israel. You can see that, in fact, 3 of the capitals have been targeted since Christmas: Damascus, Beirut, and Baghdad, and of course the heinous bombing attack against civilians in Iraq. And if you wanted any further proof that there is escalation in the pipeline, let's have a look at the defense minister of Israel's comments. Yoav Gallant said basically no top Hamas figures have been killed or captured in Gaza. On a visit to soldiers stationed there, Yoav Gallant said the government was planning for a long war, and the feeling that we will stop soon is incorrect. Without a clear victory, we will not be able to live in the Middle East. So this is turning into an existential war for the survival and existence of the Palestinian people, the survival of Israel as a military garrison for the US and UK in the Middle East, and of course the countries of the resistance axis. So inevitable escalation, Mike.
It's interesting that everywhere you look, everybody's planning for a long war. And I just wonder, is the aim here with certain policymakers and strategists to try to keep things relatively low intensity, but keep extended as much as possible, because there's lots of political capital to be made from that type of strategy of tension, if we could use that term?
Yes, definitely, I would agree. But it remains to be seen, of course, the response from Hezbollah, the Iraqi resistance, and even from Syria if the Israeli aggression continues.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Vanessa. Ben, let's come back to the UK. Now, you've mentioned Democracy Next before, but let's have a look at them again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I mean, it's just interesting you there talking about this being a pivotal year. I think it's a pivotal year. Goodness me, that's difficult to say for some reason today, for humanity, actually, and not least to do with democracy, the democratic process, the voice of the people, and for people who are looking to undermine the voice of the people and the democratic process. And as you say, we've talked about an organisation called Democracy Next before. It is a non-partisan, aka uniparty, non-profit, which means it's backed by billionaires, and their state, including the George Soros Open Society Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, their stated aim is to move us into a new democratic paradigm. So we're going to move from a paradigm of elected representatives and parliaments, elections and voting, which they say delivers polarization and confrontation. And they want to move to the next democratic paradigm of citizen representatives and permanent citizens' assemblies, representation by sortition, which they say will deliver broad consensus and common ground. Now, we know this is wide open to abuse by virtue of who convenes and controls the information going into the assembly that informs the decision-making process. Absolutely crucial question. And to give you a little bit of insight into that, beyond the Soros and Rockefeller foundations that we've already spoken about, we can look to the founder of Democracy Next, Claudia Chalice, who is a French woman and also an Obama leader for Europe at the Obama Foundation. So that means that Obama, who invaded 7 countries during his 2 presidential terms, believes that Ms. Chalice has demonstrated a commitment to advancing the common good. And actually, let's hear from Obama as we head into this crucial election year.
Understand, it's not necessary for people to believe disinformation in order to weaken democratic institutions. You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage. You just have to raise enough questions, spread enough dirt, plant enough conspiracy theorizing that citizens no longer know what to believe. Once they lose trust in their leaders, in mainstream media, in political institutions, in each other, in the possibility of truth, the game's won.
Is that a warning or is that a playbook? I'm not sure. But citizens' assemblies are going to be front and center in how the democratic process develops this year. They're already being used in Ireland. We've talked about that previously on the news, and they are beginning to raise their head across the UK. William Hague is a fan. He wrote about them in the Times on Christmas Day. He is encouraged that somewhere in this gathering darkness of hatred, lies, and opposing cultural identities, as Obama's just described, there are open-minded and constructive citizens willing to turn on a light. Thank goodness for open-minded, constructive citizens like William Hague, willing to cut through partisan politics, hatred and lies. Hague often seen recently working closely with his former political adversary, Tony Blair, on important issues such as science, the single issue all our dreams depend on, as well as getting together in person with Blair to do that funny hand thing that they like to do together as well. Now, naturally, all of this is being linked into climate action. Climate action. Remember COP? How great was that? Yeah, we're going to reach an even more fevered pitch on the climate this year. We can see here scientific journal of record Nature doing its part to reduce collective expectations about future prosperity. They say that citizens' assemblies could be set up with mandates to formulate socially acceptable sufficiency strategies. God, that sounds depressing. And strengthen policies, i.e. give more power to government. These would be based on ecological limits, fairness, and well-being for all, and include a stronger role for trade unions. So far, so communist. Nesta, who we've spoken about many times in the past on UK Column, the UK Social Impact Innovation Lab, which was set up by Tony Blair in 1998, and it now owns the Behavioural Insights team, the Nudge unit, that is owned by Nesta. They are actively promoting citizens' assemblies and sortition, specifically as it relates to climate action. So this is coming out from the centre, but it's already playing out in frontline politics. So Oliver Coppard, Mayor of South Yorkshire, can be seen here breathlessly describing a recent assembly used to inform decisions about net zero policies in God's own country, Yorkshire itself, as unlike any room I've ever been in. Goodness me, that sounds exciting. And it's also being used at the other end of the country as well to answer the same net zero questions by Cornwall Council. This letter was sent in by UK column viewer Andrew Harry. Thank you, Andrew, for sharing this with us. This is for a residents' energy panel, which is the same principle ultimately as the Citizens' Assembly. This is being run by the Sortition Foundation, who are very closely linked to Democracy Next. This time it's with 50 citizens. They're being offered 375 quid each to participate. And the panel, as it says here, will follow an established democratic engagement process that is used all over the world. It brings together a group of people selected by lottery who broadly represent the entire community. The people who attend learn about the issues, discuss them with one another, and then make recommendations about what should happen and how things should change. But all of this, of course, is based on an a priori assumption that we are already going to transition to net zero, right? So that's the context within which decision-making is being made. We talked a little bit about the UK, but this is an international movement. Democracy Next is an international organisation, and it's deeply embedded into emerging technology. So we're starting to see this alignment between democracy and technology, which is frankly terrifying. Just before Christmas, Democracy Next announced a strategic partnership with the Centre for Constructive Communication at MIT Media Lab, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And in their announcement, they said that their aim is to harness powerful AI technologies to create constructive, tech-enhanced and human-led systems shaped by the proven model of citizens' assemblies worldwide. Right? This is a proven model, apparently. Now, it's worth noting, given how the show started, that Joy Ito, formerly Dean of MIT Media Lab and a board director of the New York Times, was forced to resign his positions in 2019 for soliciting funds from Jeffrey Epstein for MIT and his own personal investment funds after Epstein had been released from jail for child sex crimes, worth noting. And it's also worth noting where all of this could potentially end up. If we fuse democracy and technology, democracy and artificial intelligence, and we get the right level of public acceptance, it's entirely possible that they may no longer see any need to consult with citizens at all.
You had a little bit of video, Ben?
Yeah, that was, please run the video.
Yeah.
The technology now is, and digital technologies mainly have an analytical power. Now we go into a predictive power, and we have seen the first examples, and your company very much involved into it. But then the next step could be to go into a prescriptive mode, which means you do not even have to have elections anymore, because you can already predict, and afterwards you can say, why do we need elections? Because we know what the result will be.
2024.
Brilliant. Okay, sticking in the UK then, quite a bit of publicity over the last few days and a couple of weeks over the Horizon IT scandal in the UK Post Office. Now, this drama series, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, has been getting lots of coverage and so on. But just to remind everybody what this is about, the Post Office installed an IT system which was absolutely full of bugs into various post offices around the country. And of course, these were run as a franchise. So the people, the sub-postmasters running these places were effectively self-employed. They were, of course, required to account for every penny. And the Horizon IT system was supposed to maintain records of all the financial transactions that went through the post offices. But the problem was, as I say, this software was full of bugs. And as a result, discrepancies appeared between what the sub-postmasters said they were processing and what the IT system said they were processing. The post office maintains its own capability for investigations and prosecutions. It prosecuted many of these sub-postmasters. Some of them went to prison. Some of them committed suicide following everything that happened. Many of them went bankrupt and lost everything. And of course, it all turned out to be completely fraudulent on the part of the post office and Fujitsu, the company that was providing the IT system. Of course, nobody from the post office nor from Fujitsu has gone to prison for what happened. It was only the sub-postmasters that did. And in the meantime, of course, not only are the post office now dragging their feet over paying compensation to those affected, although some people are dead, so they can't receive compensation. In the meantime, they've been paying their own managers extra bonuses if they've done particularly well during the inquiry, the public inquiry, which is going on at the moment. So anyway, this is the website for the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry. Do have a look at it if you want to know. And I just want to highlight one person here, and that is Andy Dunks. Now, he was a crypto key manager for Fujitsu, working on the Horizon IT program, and he was basically the man who sent out the notices to sub-postmasters saying that, effectively the software could do no wrong, and if there were mistakes, they must be mistakes at the sub-postmaster end. But when he was giving evidence in 2019, he said this. If we put it back on screen for a second, there was no Fujitsu party line. In other words, there was no sort of line from Fujitsu about the appropriateness of Horizon to be providing correct information. Unfortunately, that turned out to be untrue. And when Justice Fraser reported on that evidence, he said, Mr. Dunks expressly sought to mislead me by stating that there was no Fujitsu party line when it came to the contents of drafting witness statements about audit records for legal proceedings. There plainly is. It was used in the Fujitsu statements in 2010, and it was used by him in his statement for the Horizon Issues trial. Now, Fujitsu then, the senior manager at Fujitsu, wrote to Darren Jones, MP, about this. And in this letter, which is part of the public record, he said that in many cases, employees and key decision makers are no longer working at Fujitsu. If it emerges that any current employee intentionally misled the court or otherwise failed to meet the standards expected from Fujitsu, then they will be dismissed. And again, it's quite interesting that Mr. Dunks has not been dismissed, despite the fact that the judge found that he had, in fact, attempted to mislead the court. So that is the situation there. I'm just going to make the point very briefly that, Ben was talking about AI there. At the base of this whole thing is an unwillingness by anybody to accept the possibility that the software was wrong. And so individuals were taken to court, prosecuted, and found guilty of crimes they did not commit because the software said so. We are already seeing ourselves building a world around us where humans are taken out of the equation completely and are being replaced with what's being marketed as AI. There's nothing artificially intelligent about it. It's just badly written, in many cases, computer algorithms. We are setting ourselves up for a major fall here, Ben, and I think we need to really consider that in the coming months.
I absolutely agree. Yes, I think the technology, digitization, has gone far too far, and it's not just open to abuse, it's open to the kind of fundamental problems that you just described there. And actually, this leads in quite nicely into what I'm going to talk about, just to finish things off here, which is that our youth who have grown up in a purely digital world are being stolen from us. Essentially, they are being propagandized on a constant basis by the establishment. And this has been going on not just for the past few years, this has been going on in many ways for centuries. They say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And I came across this organization called Young England, which was established in the 1840s. This is a political group which was based on an idealized feudalism, an absolute monarch, and a strong established church with the philanthropy of noblesse oblige as the basis for its paternalistic form of social organization. So this was led by Benjamin Disraeli, the prime minister to be. He wasn't prime minister at the time that this was running, but he did become the prime minister a couple of decades later. And the idea behind the organization was to quell social unrest in the face of the huge transformation taking place driven by the first industrial revolution, right? And it was set up by philanthropists at the time, and you can read that directly towards people like Soros and Rockefeller that we've been talking about earlier on today. Interestingly, Disraeli also said that the world is governed by different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes, which also feels incredibly relevant today. So that was the first industrial revolution. We're now on to the fourth industrial revolution. But as I say, the playbook remains largely the same. There is a rhyme here, and the youth are being heavily targeted and propagandized. The world is still governed by different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. That's what we spend our time talking about here at UK Column. And we've previously spoken about the extreme left-wing UK youth charity, My Life, My Say, and its connections behind the scenes to Tony Blair, David Cameron, Sadiq Khan, the royal family, the Rothschild family, the US State Department, MI6, yada, yada, yada. As a whole, it's just the tip of the iceberg that I've touched on there. And we're going to hear much more about them as the year goes on, because targeting Gen Z, the under 30s, and if you remember from what I spoke about this previously, the big My Life, My Say event had an age restriction on it. If you were over 30, you were not allowed to attend. I couldn't go to it, right? So this is a very deliberate effort to isolate and propagandize a specific subset of the population. And this fantastic, fascinating, slightly grim report came out just before Christmas, which I wanted to draw your attention to, which you should go and find and read. We'll put this in the show notes. And this is basically a directive to business to tell them everything they need to know about the generation changing everything. Right? This was issued by Oliver Wyman, which is a big consulting firm, and the News Movement, who I've spoken about previously. Essentially what they're saying here is, can a single generation save the world? Have you got it in you, Gen Z? It happened in the 1940s when the so-called greatest generation successfully turned back fascism and ushered in a long period of stability and rising living standards. Now come what may be the rightful heirs to the mantle, a consequential generation that may be humankind's best and greatest hope in the existential battles against global warming, inequality, political and social unrest, transgenderism, all of the hot topics that these young people have been immersed in over the past few years. Oliver Wyman's UK chairman, so I just mentioned that this report came from Oliver Wyman. The UK chairman is this fella, Hugh Van Steenis. This is a photo of him speaking at an event hosted by Tortoise Media, who are a My Life, My Say partner. I shared this previously because it was of particular interest because that event was convened by Tortoise editor James Harding and Lord Jacob Rothschild. So this is the provenance of the report that I've just drawn your attention to. This is where it's coming from. And it's also been issued by this funky little crew, the News Movement, led by Kamal Ahmed, the former Guardian and BBC editor. You can see him on the right-hand side there. He's spoken about this project at the World Economic Forum. He's also a host at Anthropy, the WEF by the Sea event that we've spoken about numerous times and will continue to do so. This isn't just about these two organisations or that report. As I said, it's absolutely everywhere. I'm going to do a separate piece on how this is being planned and executed by a whole range of different charities, including the British Council, the British Youth Council. They're in on the game. They have a programme called the UK Youth Parliament, trying to get Gen Z involved in politics. Now look at that image, and what do you immediately see? Yeah. So for me, the question is, well, where are the natives and where are the men? Right. This is a fundamental shift in public life. Who goes into Parliament? Who stands at the dispatch box? You know, this is not me saying that I don't think that it's appropriate for immigrants or women to be in politics or be in public life at all. But the way that that's positioned, and again, if you go to the My Life, My Say website, you'll see exactly the same thing. You go to the Anthropy website, you see exactly the same thing. The people they're putting front and centre do not look like the native population of the country, and that's being done on purpose. This is the future that they're trying to construct. Yeah. And by the way, I should just say, no offence to any of the young people in that photo or any of the other photos that we've been showing here, whether it's the My Life, My Say event or elsewhere. This isn't about you. We're not attacking you. What we're pointing out is that the establishment, the people running and funding the organisations that are promoting this narrative, do not have your best interests at heart. It's not just about us. This is about you too, right? And this ends up in an extraordinarily bad place, right? We've seen this used elsewhere. This is the same tactic used with Greta Thunberg and mobilising young people around climate change. And ultimately, their end goal is to demonise the old in the minds of the young, right? And this doesn't end well. And I'm going to share an image with you now that was taken in the S21 torture chamber. It's a Khmer Rouge torture chamber in Phnom Penh, which is the capital of Cambodia. I've been in that room, and that bed is still in that room. The body's not there. This was taken when they found the torture chamber, which is in an old school in the centre of Phnom Penh. And that bed, as you can see, saw and played host to the most unimaginable atrocities. And the worst torturers, the people who were the most enthusiastic and psychopathic and vindictive and evil, the worst ones in those torture chambers were the young. It was the 15-year-olds, the 16-year-olds, the 17-year-olds, because they had been convinced by the Khmer Rouge that the old were their enemy. They were evil, that all of the evils of the world could be placed on their shoulders. And unfortunately, the ideological environment that we're in right now leads us directly to that kind of behaviour. And this is an extraordinarily dangerous thing for politicians and the establishment to be doing. And unfortunately, they know it. This is deliberate. And we need to bear this in mind. And I don't want to end this on a sour note or a negative note, but let's just think about this. And if you know anyone from younger generations, whether, 30, 20, like however old they are, please reach out to them. Start building those connections. Start demonstrating that we're not evil. We are not the enemy. And that actually the people who are pushing these messages are the people that need to be pushed back against.
Okay, Ben, thank you very much for that. And we are going to have to leave it there for today. We will be back, of course, at 1 p.m. as usual on Monday. If you're